If you'd have told anyone prior to around 2018 that you'd spent your hard-earned money on the car to my right, they would have laughed at you quite loudly, quite audibly in fact, because up until recently, it was the laughing stock of the Porsche lineup. But it's actually also one of the most crucial and important cars in their rather impressive history. Hello and welcome to the Porsche 924. Yes, today you join me with one of Porsche's almost reluctant legends, the 924. It's a very interesting car and we're going to talk a little bit about its history, how it came to light and why the Porsche enthusiast absolutely loathes this thing. This particular example is a 1983 924 in its Golden Splendour. We're going to have a proper look around it inside and out and get it out on the road, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I think. So let's crack on. It all rolls back to the rather glorious era that was the 1970s, although it wasn't so glorious for Porsche. They weren't the powerhouse that they are today. They were in fact in quite a bit of trouble. They needed to get buyers in the door with a cheap entry-level car, but they didn't really have the budget or the funding to develop such a thing. So they went into partnership with their good friends Volkswagen. This was a win-win for both manufacturers because Porsche got some much needed cash flow and Volkswagen got some much needed sports car development intelligence, because this car was going to be a joint thing sold between both manufacturers. Volkswagen, it was going to be their flagship sports car, codenamed Project 425, whilst for Porsche it was going to be their entry-level sports car, the 924. It was a simple formula really. Use all of that rather excellent Porsche dynamic driveline know-how and pair it with a pre-developed Volkswagen engine, cutting costs massively. Unfortunately, things didn't go quite to plan, for Volkswagen that is, at least, because of that pesky 1973 oil crisis. As a result, the idea of a flagship sports car didn't really sound that great on paper to the suits in Volkswagen HQ and to the buyers in dealerships. They decided to sell their rights and their half of the project back to Porsche and instead focus on their all-new fancy, all-singing, all-dancing, but slightly more economical Scirocco. This could be argued to be a win for Porsche because they'd had all of that handy help from Volkswagen and now they had this car all to themselves. It's at this point that things started to unravel for the proper out-and-out Porsche enthusiast because, as you might have noticed, this has quite a long bonnet, and that's because the engine is up here. The 924 was the first Porsche to use a factory-fitted front engine, water cooling and a rear-wheel drive layout. Though the 928 was developed beforehand, it was this that went on sale first in the mid-1970s. The 924 did its job rather well and introduced a wealth of new, lower-income, economy-focused buyers who wanted a Porsche at a fraction of the price. They couldn't afford a 911, but they could afford one of these. It got them in the door and it got Porsche out of a massive hole. Though it wasn't the purest Porsche, definitely, it was a stepping stone that allowed them to develop the legendary Porsche 944, which would go on to be one of the most successful selling Porsche models of all time. It's a very significant car, this, whether you like the idea or not. Now, I promise you, you haven't taken any sort of psychedelics. This is actually a factory upholstery option for these Porsches. Any of you that are familiar with Porsches of this era, whether it's a 924, 28, 44, you will be familiar with this fabric. I think it looks absolutely excellent. And in an economy budget style Porsche, I think it's really a very nice touch. It looks the part, and paired with the quality fit and finish of the rest of the cabin, it makes this a very nice place to be. The 924 has seating for four. It's even got some room for your legs back there. I don't think you get a full-grown adult in there for a long journey, but you could squeeze them in there if need be, or put your kids in the back. It's classic 1980s, 1970s German sports car in here, really. Good quality materials, that iconic Porsche steering wheel. I've even got a removable sunroof, which I can stow into a bespoke bag in my glass-fronted tailgate. Overall, I like the cabin of the 924. You can very clearly see where it influenced the later models, and I don't think that's a bad thing. And here lies the very thing that leaves classic Porsche enthusiasts laying awake at night. A front-mounted, water-cooled, four-cylinder Volkswagen-developed engine in a Porsche. How horrendous. What you're looking at here is Volkswagen's EA831 engine. It's a four-cylinder water-cooled engine that first found its home into the Audi 100 series, followed by this, the 924, and then eventually the Volkswagen LT vans. Now, this is a bit of a common misconception, and a lot of people will look at these 924s and go, oh, you've got a Volkswagen van engine in your Porsche. But it's actually the other way around. You've got a Porsche engine in your Volkswagen van because it found a home here a lot earlier than it did in the vans. Now, power, even I will admit, isn't brilliant. The performance figures on a 924 certainly aren't its strong suit. In its most restricted US emissions regulated form, it was only good for around 95 brake horsepower. These less restricted European cars did around 125 horsepower with a 0 to 60 time of 9.5 seconds and a top speed of a stonking 124 miles an hour. Certainly not that respectable, but later into production, Porsche did a very fun thing. They whacked a big old turbo on this, which took the top speed from 124 right the way up to 142 miles an hour. As the magazines of the time put it, it's fast at last. These cars were available with a variety of gearboxes. If you really hated driving, you could get a 3-speed automatic, which was both sluggish and slow, especially paired with a low-powered engine like this. Most cars had a 4-speed manual transmission before a dogleg 5-speed was introduced, which was scrapped in 1980 and replaced with a more conventional, traditional 5-speed manual gearbox, which is what this car and most of the later ones have. So, we've had a little bit of a look inside now. I've talked to you a little bit about the history. That leaves one crucial thing to do. Take it out for a drive. So, the splendid golden Porsche 924. What's it like to drive? Let's find out. Immediately got a thumbs up. I hadn't even left where I was filming. It's just such a striking car to look at, there's no getting around it. With this interior and the gold paintwork, it's a real looker. But now, down to the performance. It's not that fast, I'm going to be brutally honest about it. There's a decent amount of power delivery, but the engine just doesn't really back up the Porsche nameplate. It's got a little bit of pull in the early gears, but then it sort of just dissolves into nothing. It's somewhat quick, but it's also at the same time a little bit underwhelming when you put the hammer down. That being said, dynamically, it's quite a pleasant thing. In the corners, it's nice and concise and tight, and it feels pretty well balanced overall, I'd say, especially for the era. I've got a 5-speed manual gearbox on offer, and I'm struggling to come up with anything to complain about it really. The throws are of a nice length, it's good clutch action, it's a box that suits this car very well. Naturally, I've got my pop-up headlights in full upright position because when you're driving a Porsche of this era, a 944, a 928, a 924, you have to have the pop-ups up. It's the law. It's a relatively nimble little thing, though the lack of power-assisted steering does come into play when you're doing tighter little parking manoeuvres or short U-turns like I've just done there. The engine note does leave a little bit to be desired. Obviously, this isn't a Porsche-developed engine. You do lack a little bit of that purity, so to speak. And I think the engine note really does emphasise that. I could be in a Volkswagen van or an Audi saloon of the same era. There's nothing particularly special about it. There's no fanfare, so to speak. So, the Porsche 924, what do I think? Well, it's an interesting one because yes, it doesn't have a Porsche-developed engine. Yes, it's not the fastest, but I can't help but love it. I think it looks absolutely epic. It's got pop-up headlights, that classic glass tailgate, and in a spec like this, it just looks the part. It's quintessential late 70s, early 80s sports car in my opinion. I think it's a very significant car in Porsche's history, and in recent years, it's become quite a trendy thing. Back in the day, you could pick one of these up in good form for around 1,500 quid, perhaps even less, but you've got to double that now if you want a half-decent one with a few little niggles here and there. They're very reliable things. Once you do get into one, you can really look after these very cheaply, especially if it's already been well maintained throughout its life. If I wanted an out-and-out fun, proper enthusiast driver's car, I'd probably go for either a late turbo car or a 944. But if you just want a cool, retro, fun daily driver, especially one of these earlier cars which is now tax and MOT and ULEZ exempt, you've really got to consider one of these, especially while they're still pretty good value for money. Thank you very much for watching the video review of this golden Porsche 924.